Grady, did you know that since Pastor Ryan was ordained last week, you are his first official baptism as an ordained pastor? How cool is that? There's gonna be many more. There's gonna be many more because Messiah, we're gonna keep having kids. We're gonna make this happen. You also saw in the video that Pastor Chuck had a hot dog in his desk. That's not by chance. We're in the middle of a hot dog eating contest. This is something that lasts from Memorial Day to Labor Day. During that time, if you can eat your age. And so he's definitely staying on top of it. A lot of people have come and asked me questions about the rules, like, do you have to have a bun, and et cetera, et cetera. And look, I'm not the guy. I'm not the guy. He's the dictator. I mean, the commissioner. But he doesn't really know what you do. So he says you have to have a bun. Like, if you're gluten-free, you can have a gluten-free bun or a corn tortilla, according to me. I mean, I would just do that. Or if you're like health conscious and you have a greasy hot dog and you lettuce wrap it or something, like, I'm okay with that. I don't know what he would say, but we are in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount. In fact, we've been in it for like 2.5 months. And so we're now into chapter 7. We're deep into chapter 7. And so we're getting towards the end. And it's kind of like Jesus in his teaching, it just gets more intense and more intense. And this is verse 7 of chapter 7. Jesus says, ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks, the door will be opened. Now, if I were to ask you right now, what comes to mind when I say ask, seek, and knock? What images naturally come to your mind when that's read? Like, where does your mind immediately go? I'll show you a picture of where my mind immediately goes. It goes to Tom Cruise's private jet. That's where my mind goes. See, when we say ask, seek, knock, I'm like, well, God, you know what I really want. His private jet. It's got a lavish interior. It's a Gulfstream 4. It has room for 19 passengers. It has a movie room and a jacuzzi at 40,000 feet. Sign me up. I feel the need for speed, right? Of course. Now that might be not where your mind goes, but it's where my mind goes. We ask for stuff and God's supposed to give, which always leads to, but yeah, Pastor, but he didn't answer. I asked and he didn't come through. And I knocked and she still has cancer. And I was seeking, but I ended up more confused, more lonely, and to be honest, a little bit bitter. Right? I mean, that's where it goes. We read a passage like this, and this is where our mind goes. Or maybe you think about the abuses of it. You turn on the TV, there's a preacher, and he's telling you, just ask, just name it, just claim it. First, give a donation to us, and then you can ask and name it and claim it, and then God gives you the Ferrari. That's the promise. Like, God is a cosmic vending machine. So the abuses of a passage like this are obvious. They're obvious. So I believe this section really needs to be looked at in two parts. Ask, seek, and knock with God, and ask, seek, and knock with others. And I want to look at the others first. When you find out that your friend has been in bad shape, been going through it, and they didn't ask, like they didn't come to you for help, it can almost feel like betrayal, right? Why? Because asking connects. So if you first of all think about it from the human level, asking is a way of saying, I trust you, I need you, I connected to you. It also humbles us. It also humbles us to have to ask. And here's the thing, a humble person is an easier person for God to work on. They pray differently. They treat others differently. They worship differently. They realize that dependence, if your dependence is on God, dependence is actually a superpower. You know, we're about to have the 250th anniversary of our country, and the Declaration of Independence is a good thing for our nation. But it can be a bad thing for us personally sometimes. Like the good old pull up your boots by the bootstraps kind of thing. Like do it yourself independence or interdependence. It's good to be the kind of person that wants to take care of things. It's good to be the kind of person that's responsible. Hard work and determination are good. But sometimes in order to keep the mystique going, the illusion of how you're doing, we hide things. We hide things. We'd be ashamed for people to know what we struggle with. We'd be ashamed for people to know what we're going through. We can't ask. And if asking connects you, then not asking disconnects you. It disconnects you from others, disconnects you from your family, from your friends, from your coworkers. And maybe on a spiritual side, it also disconnects you from prayer warriors. Prayer warriors. And there are so many times in life, but there are times in life where prayer is like the only option. It's the only thing you've got left. And speaking from experience, and I've had a lot of experience with a lot of different people, you want as many hands folded, asking as possible. Asking is an important part of living. I'm gonna give you a sentence, thinking about independence a little bit, a sentence, and we'll put it up on the screen. I want you just to fill in the blank, first word that comes to mind. Josh, blank, lives with his parents. What's the first word that comes to mind? Still, anybody else? Josh still lives with his parents. Which leads to sentence number 2, so let's look at this one as well. Let's put that on the screen. Josh is a, fill in the blank, somebody. Josh is a what? Amen, that's actually what he is. Anybody else think loser? I would. By the way, how many of you thought loser? I just wanna know. Okay, thank you. Pastor's wife, that makes sense. Yeah, you're right, Josh is actually 8 years old. He's 8 years old. He lost his puppy. He goes by the name Joshy at home. He's a sweet little kid. No, in our minds, a lot of times what happens is Josh is 41. He lives in the basement. He collects Pokemon cards. Why is this? I think because like deep in our bones, we want independence. So when you ask, when you seek, when you knock in a healthy way, you're giving other people the chance. They can say no, but at least it connects you. It connects you. You're confessing a dependence on them for help that admits your own humility, your own brokenness, your own sinfulness, and that's healthy. What's unhealthy is when we think that we don't need a doctor. And Jesus said that he's come to heal, and only the sick know that they need him. Now at this point, there's probably one of you, maybe all of you, you're saying, yeah. But what about like the crazy relative clause? Because I've got this brother, and you're not gonna believe how many checks I've written, and the money just disappears and he comes back again. Or my niece, she goes and she plays the lotto, wastes the money. So why is it like that a teaching like this, immediately our minds go to the abuses of it? The abuses. Like, I know people that ask and ask, they literally knock, and it's all a bit fishy, and they seem to be worse off. Well, a couple thoughts. How many of us, if we were translating the Bible, we would like add a disclaimer to this teaching? I think that happens a lot. Ask, seek, and knock, unless it's your brother Thad, in which case, tell him to cut his hair, get a job, right? We want to offset the abuses of the teaching. And Jesus, as so often he does, he makes this too open-ended, which again makes me think maybe Jesus is more interested in making sure that we're talking to others, connecting, and that we're talking to God, that we're connecting with God, than making claims about how they will answer. Number two, are there any moms out there today? Moms, do your kids ever ask you for anything? All the time. Like, all the time. What kinds of things? Give me an example. Snacks. What else? Money. What else? Childcare. Oh, that sounds personal. Your daughter's sitting next to you. I bet she does. If you had a choice, Mary, pastor's wife, again, I'm picking on you, I love this. All mothers, if you had a choice, would you prefer them to keep asking for this stuff, even some of the crazy stuff? Of course. Keep asking. Because the key is connection. If they don't ask, you're disconnected. Besides, you can always say no, or not at this time, maybe later. So turn this around and let's again think about a relationship with God, because I think that's where Jesus primarily is talking. It's what he's doing here. God says, ask, seek, and knock. I'm listening to you. As attentively as your mother, do it. At least we're talking. It's the silence that kills the relationship. With asking, God can also always say no. It's not a command. And God says no a lot. He says no a lot to me as well. Sometimes he also says wait. Sometimes he says later. And as parents, I think we get that. We get that in our human relationships. We understand that really well, which is what the last section is all about. Jesus continues his thought on ask, seek, and knock, and then he continues it in verse 9. He says, which of you, if your son asked for bread, would give him a stone? If he asked for a fish, you would give him a snake. If you then, though you are evil, sorry dads, it's not Father's Day, that's next weekend. If you dads know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? By the way, bread in the first century would have looked like a stone. It didn't come in a bag pre-sliced with the word Wonder Bread on the cover, nothing like that. It was a ball of dough cooked over an open fire. Bread looked like stones, and some fish do look like snakes. So it's not a stretch that Jesus is doing here. So just because you could trick your kids with one of these doesn't mean you would trick your kids or that you should trick your kids. Prayer is a statement about God. It's a statement about what you believe about God. To say it another way, Jesus is saying, dads, pretty much all of you are below average. You're not that great. At times, you're mean to your kids. You're grumpy. And honestly, you don't listen all that well, sometimes on purpose. Can I get an amen from everyone else? My kids, don't you say a word. So, admittedly, you're not a perfect dad, and you know that. But even you, Jesus said, would never promise your kids some bread and toss them a stone. Or you would never offer your kid a fish and then sneak a snake in, right? So if you, not perfect father, wouldn't do that, and you know how to do good things, how much more our perfect creator, God our heavenly Father, how much more does he know how to answer requests? Who of you, when your child comes to you, would give them something bad? Of course not. God won't do that either, because he's your Father. Here's a core sentence today. Do you have a deep, deep sense that God has given you stone when you've asked for bread? Because that will mess up your faith. It's the core thing I think you need to reconcile about faith. If you believe deep inside of you that God has given you a snake instead of a fish, It's the deepest question I'll ask today. It's a pretty deep spiritual question. Because really generous people, in my experience, really generous people don't tend to think God gives out stone. And people that do think they've been dealt stone in life, I guarantee you it is people who are not giving out bread to others. They're not giving out anything to others. So how you view God, and partially his answer to prayer, impacts the spirit of generosity that's within you. And that spirit of generosity is not just about offering plates. It's about how you live life and how you treat others. The beautiful thing is Jesus, he invites us to ask. He doesn't tell us the answer. Now, all the good parents, like, we know the answer, right? I'll give my kids what they need, not necessarily what they want. See, God says at the end, do you want to know how I answer prayer? Well, just think about your life as a parent. I do it the same way. That's what verses 9 through 11 are. And that's the gospel in this passage. God is your parent. He's that close. He's that caring. He's that loving. That's what the cross does. It restores our relationship with God and others. Now, if anyone is new in church, like you didn't grow up in church or you're just starting to learn about the teachings of Jesus, I think this is a good section to reflect on, a good thing to think about. Because even if you're not religious, sometimes you pray. And I get it, hardly ever. But there's been times where you've had to resort to it and no miracle happened. She had the cancer and no miracle happened. And you prayed that prayer, I prayed that prayer. Everybody, no matter how religious they are, they prayed that prayer. And we both received the same answer at times, no miracle. And so if that's the case, then for some people, perhaps there is no God. Or if there is a God, he's not a very good God. Now, by that definition, you coming to faith would require that every prayer request you have ever made better get answered the way you think it should and the way you want, or else there is no God. By that logic, do you know what you've just done? You've made yourself God. You've made yourself omnipotent, all powerful, omniscient, all-knowing. You're the highest of ethics and justice. You're the moral authority. It's one of the reasons I love the movie Bruce Almighty with Jim Carrey. It shows off the error in this thinking so easily that once you get into the grind of it, you would never want to be the eternal judge of all humanity. Something may look like a good idea today, but you look back and it was a belly flop. It was the wrong way to go. Like if Tom actually dropped off his private jet today, and I'd be so happy and I'd hug him, he'd be down here and I'd give him a big hug down here. And then I would fly in 4 hours of luxury up to the Pacific Northwest, and I'd land and be so sweet. And then the pilot would let me know that just cost me over $6,000 an hour for the gas and for their time. And by the way, I don't have a hangar to park the thing in. The thing I could pray for, I can't even operate it. I can't even park it. By the way, speaking of gas, who can afford your gas right now in your car? See, this is the conundrum faced in the book of Job. There's one book of the Bible and it's completely dedicated to this question. Completely dedicated to this question, the book of Job, spelled like Job. His name was Job. And Job, it tells us, was a good moral man who loved God and loved his family. But Satan believed this is only because God keeps blessing him. If he lost his wealth, if he lost his health, if he lost his family, Satan claims that Job would become the greatest God hater of them all. And all that happens to Job. He loses it all. Even his kids, 7 sons, 3 daughters. It's a tragic story. And people ask, like, is this story true? Of course it's true. It's happening all the time to people everywhere. And some of them curse God and others learn to draw closer to God. And now some people want to know, yeah, but is it historical? Did Job really live? Did this really happen to him, or is it just a metaphor for the human condition? Why can't it be both? Why can't it be both? The epistle of James in the New Testament surely seems to think that Job was a real man of great perseverance and great faith. And at the same time, life sometimes is really hard. And we face tremendous tragedy. And we're at our best when we remember that God has not abandoned us. Yes, this world is broken, but ever since Genesis 3, God has been doing everything he can to put it back together again. And the cross of Christ that we have at the front of our church, it's the best example of it, that God is for us, would do anything to get us. And the stuff we go through is not a just snap God's fingers kind of thing, and it just goes away. No, redemption, in the theological sense, in the real sense, redemption requires something more. It's not possible with the snap of the fingers. Jesus had to die, really. And the book of Revelation promises that through that death and his resurrection, that Jesus is making all things new. The last word of the Bible is that Jesus is making all things new. So that thing that happened, was it unjust? Was it wrong? Was it evil? Sure. Was it heartbreaking? Yes, I get it. It was terrible. But maybe it's time to put the blame where it really belongs. Sin, our brokenness, namely the brokenness of humanity, the sins we do, but also the sins we receive back. In the story of Job, he refused to curse God. His wife tried to get him to do it. Just curse God so you can die, so you can be at peace again. 3 of his friends tried to get him to do it. They said, God must be doing this to you because of some mistake you made, Job. You must have made a mistake. And he's like, that's not why this is happening. That's not why my kids died. It's not why my health is failing. It's not until the very end that Job begs God, hey, will you tell me why all these bad things are happening to this good person? And God, the first thing he does is he reminds him who's in charge. Job, were you there when I drew up the heavens? When I measured them out with a tape measure? When I made sure that everything was just right, the gravitational force and everything else? Were you there when I spoke it with just a word? When I spoke everything into existence? Job, remember who's the creator here. You're asking deep questions that you can't possibly understand. The reasoning behind so many things and why they happened. About all the prayers that ended with no miracles. But don't ask to do my job. Don't ask to do my job. You can't possibly understand the reasoning, so instead, let me show you what I'm gonna do about it. First for you. But it's the same sort of redemption and restoration that I offer to humanity in my son Christ. Job repents, and then God does exactly what he promised to do. The end of Job's life, it says, became greater than the beginning. God never gave him an explanation, but he restored him. And he blessed him with 10 more kids, 7 sons and 3 daughters, with the author's note that these daughters, nowhere in the land were found more beautiful daughters than Job's. In fact, he granted his daughters, Job, granted his daughters an inheritance along with his sons, which was unheard of at this time. Like there's all kinds of restoration that's happening in the story. God is restoring them, but Job is also restoring the original relationship in the Garden of Eden. The end of Job's life became greater than the beginning. His wealth, what about his wealth? Well, it says that he had double the fortune that he had before. 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels. And I know what you're all thinking. You also wish you had 6,000 camels. Me too. The church nativity scene would be the greatest in the history of nativity scenes. And I'm sure there's other useful purposes for camels in St. Charles, Missouri. We could open a camel taco stand or something like that. The story of Job ends with this, and I want to show these verses to you. It says, after this, Job lived 140 years more. He saw his children and their children to the fourth generation, which, by the way, is every grandparent, great-grandparent's dream. And so Job died, an old man and full of years. And that last sentence is a good statement. That's a good thing. Good thing he didn't give up on life, and good thing he didn't give up on God. And now God's answer to our prayers makes a little more sense. When God says no or not yet, maybe he's preparing us for something better on the other side. And the problem is we just don't have the perspective to understand that. I've been watching Major League Baseball this year with the new robo-ump. The balls and strikes are still called by the umpire, but each team gets 2 challenges a game, so if a pitcher or the catcher thinks the ball was actually a strike, they can challenge it. Likewise, the hitter thinks that a strike was actually a ball, can challenge it, and they go to a quick instant replay, but you only get 2 per game unless you get one of them right. And here's what I've noticed. Umpires miss a lot of calls every game. Some umpires miss a lot more calls. And sometimes the pitchers think something's a strike, but they don't catch it all that right. But the catchers, at least a lot of them, not the catcher for my team, they seem to know what's a ball and a strike, and their challenges tend to be accepted more over than not. And my thought was maybe they just have the best perspective on what the strike zone is. God is not challenging Job's feelings. He's not challenging the tragedies that he's gone through. They're heartbreaking, but he is challenging his perspective. God is not discounting what you go through either. Hardly. Your feelings are legitimate, but your perspective sometimes isn't. Mine isn't either. Because we can't possibly understand why all the things happen the way they're happening. But what we need to accept, at least within the Christian faith, is that God is doing everything he can to put it all back together again. He loves you. So when Jesus says ask, seek, and knock, it's not because God's gonna give you exactly what you want, but it's because God loves you so much that he's gonna only give you what's the best for you. Just like you try to do for your kids. And in the same way that God loves you, that's why he answers the way he answers. I love that Jesus closes out this section of chapter 7 with verse 12. In a sense, what he's saying is you could read the entire Old Testament, 39 books. You could read all the prophets and the Torah and all of it, or you could just read verse 12. So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. What is the entire Old Testament trying to do? What's it trying to restore? Our relationship with God and our relationship with others. And the entire gospel, the New Testament, the entire gospel is Jesus winning the battle against death to make that happen. I want to close with a song. It comes from Psalm 90. So I'm going to invite the band to come up. This song knows that life isn't going to be without trials, because it's not going to be without trials. But it asks God's love to be the deciding factor, the thing that satisfies, the thing that heals. And the psalmist that wrote these psalms, this is the oldest psalm in the Bible. The psalmist that wrote this psalm is Moses. Yes, he's a prophet, but he's also a songwriter. And it's the oldest psalm we have. He's been wandering in the desert with former Jewish slaves in Egypt. And they've been wandering for 40 years. And right before they get to the promised land, he loses his brother Aaron and his sister Miriam. Aaron, his brother, was the leader of the priests. Miriam, his sister, is the one who saw Pharaoh's daughter rescue Moses in the basket from the Nile River. And she's the one that suggested that she could find a nanny to take care of the baby, her mom. So Moses' own mother secretly became his nursemaid. So she's gone, his sister that helped rescue him. And now Moses finds out that he and the rest of his generation will not enter the promised land. But he knows it's deserved. He understands the brevity of human existence. When they were lost, wandering in a desert, Moses declares that God was their dwelling place. When they had no home, God was their home. And in this song, he offers a wise and humble prayer that God would teach us to number our days. Not to live in fear of time running out, but to live with purpose and to live with wisdom. This psalm is classically read at funerals and on New Year's Eve. It challenges us believers to stop drifting through life and instead to anchor our temporary lives to our Creator God. This is what he says. He says, Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Before the mountains were born, before the birth of the world, you were already the everlasting God. So teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Satisfy us in the morning with your unfailing love, that we may sing for joy and be glad all our days. May your deeds be shown to your servants and your splendor to our children. Please stand, let's sing.